War in Lebanon, cultural heritage at risk. Churches, mosques, and archaeological sites. In its widespread demolition campaign in southern Lebanon, the Israeli military is accused of also destroying cultural and religious heritage. The devastation has been documented by the NGO Green Southerners, which denounces the actions as a direct attack on the historic bond between local residents and their land. Russia-led Eurasian Economic Union urges Armenian referendum. In the run-up to Armenia's decisive June 7 elections, Eurasian Economic Union (EAU) leaders issued a joint statement warning Armenia that its EU accession plans pose serious risks to the economic security of all EAU countries. During their summit in Astana on Friday, the leaders of Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan called on Yerevan to hold a national referendum as soon as possible on Armenia's choice between the EU and the Moscow-led bloc. They warned Yerevan that its move towards EU accession may lead to the country's suspension from the organization and launched a so-called formal review into Armenia's membership in view of a possible suspension by December. Russian President Vladimir Putin has already touted the idea of a referendum on Armenia's future, saying earlier that it would be quite logical to ask the Armenian citizens what their choice would be. Based on that, we would make our own choice as well, he said at the time. On Friday, Putin also repeated an earlier parallel he made between Ukraine and Armenia, telling the gathered press that the crisis in Ukraine began at one point with Ukraine's attempts to join the EU. Putin has previously said that almost 500,000 Russian soldiers have been killed in Putin's war on Ukraine, says GCHQ. Notifications can be managed in browser preferences. Russia has lost 500,000 soldiers since it began its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the UK's intelligence chief said in London. GCHQ director Anne Keist Butler gave the latest figure for Russian casualties in Ukraine during her first public speech at Bletchley Park, saying it proved Vladimir Putin was going backwards in the battlefield. Ms. Keist Butler warned Russia was risking a wider conflict in Europe by targeting critical infrastructure and supply chains across the continent. She also said Russian security services were behind espionage plots in multiple countries and blamed Moscow for scaling up its daily hybrid activity against the UK and Europe. Assessments by Western intelligence and independent analysts suggest both Russia and Ukraine have seen hundreds of thousands of troops killed in the war, with Moscow's losses likely significantly higher than Kiev's. Neither side publishes regular figures on its own casualties, and both accuse each other of exaggerating their enemies' losses. An estimate by exiled Russian media outlets Meduza and Mediazona recently suggested that close to 352,000 Russian soldiers had been